Hi, and welcome to first year microeconomics. In this presentation, we are going to start answering the question, where do prices come from? To do this, we need to build an economic model. The economic model that we're going to build is called the perfectly competitive market model. Now, the perfectly competitive market model sometimes creates confusion. For example, if you read the popular press, you may get the idea that the perfectly competitive market model is some sort of invention by economists that aims to oppress consumers, workers, and generally make us all unhappy. Or you might get the idea that the perfectly competitive market model is some sort of textbook fantasy dreamed up by economists to amuse themselves. Now, unfortunately, most of these critiques do not understand either the role of a model in economics or the assumptions behind the perfectly competitive market model. Let's start off with the first of these issues. What is a model? In the physical and the social sciences, models are used to help us analyse the real world. Unfortunately, the real world is a nasty, complex place. So to understand the real world, we use models. A model is a simplified version of the real world. Just like a model plane, an economic model will look like the real world, but is missing a lot of real world features and complexity. And just like a model plane is different from a real plane, an economic model is different to a real economy. A key part of learning economics is learning how to build economic models and how the models differ from reality. To start building a model, we have to ask a simple question. What is our objective? What are we trying to achieve? For example, suppose we are building a model plane. If our objective is to build a model that looks like a real plane but can sit on our bedside table, then we might build a model plastic plane like the one pictured here. But let's say that the purpose of our model is to have fun flying it in a field near our house. Well, in that case, the plastic model is not very useful. It is the wrong kind of model for our task. Rather, we might want to build a model like the one pictured here, a model made of lightweight wood and sturdy enough so that it won't fall to bits when it lands. But let's say our objective is different again. Suppose we want our model to fly on its own power and be controlled from the ground. Well, in that case, our model might look like this one. So, now we have 3 model planes. Which is the right model? Well, that depends on our objective. All 3 are models of a plane. They are all simplified versions of a real plane. But which model we want to use depends on our purpose. In economics, we build models just like model planes. Why? Well, because we want to try to understand the real world. And using models helps us to simplify the real world and to focus on the bits that are important to answering our questions. So an economic model helps us gain insight into how the world works. Now, there are many economic models. Different models are designed to answer different questions. In this course, we will concentrate on 2 economic models. Firstly, the perfectly competitive market model. Then we will look at the monopoly model. So how do we build an economic model? We don't use plastic or wood. Rather, our starting point is a set of assumptions. These assumptions are the building blocks for our model. We have to make assumptions that are relevant to the question that we want to answer. So, for example, our question here is, where do prices come from? We need to build a model that can generate prices that are consistent with the prices we see in the real world. So we need assumptions that can build the right economic model. But if we were answering a different question, we would need different assumptions and a different model. For example, Say you wanted an economic model to answer the question, how do Chinese iron ore buyers negotiate with a large Australian mining company? Well, that question would need an economic model built on different assumptions, because we're asking a different question. So, the first step in building an economic model is to define the questions that you want to try and answer and define a set of assumptions that will simplify the real world and allow you to build a model that will help you answer your questions. The second step is to build the economic model on the foundation of the assumptions. Our tools to build an economic model are diagrams, mathematics, and logical argument. Put simply, what logical conclusions can we make on the basis of our assumptions? Now in this course, we will use diagrams, formal mathematics, and verbal reasoning. As you build more complex models in later courses, you will find that mathematics becomes the modelling tool of choice in economics. But never forget, an economic model is only as good as the assumptions that it is built on. If the assumptions are poor, for example, they do not align with real-world behaviour, then the outcome of a model will not help you to understand the real world. The third step is to get the output from the model. What does the model tell us? In particular, what is the answer to your underlying question? Does the model answer the question? And if so, what is the answer? But don't stop there. Make sure you go back and check the output of your model against the real world. Sometimes you can do this by checking if the answer provided by the model makes sense. In other words, does the answer align with the behaviour that you actually see in the real world? More formally, you can check the model against real-world data, using econometrics or by using other statistical techniques. Always remember to check the answer provided by your model against the real world. After all, it's the real world that you're actually interested in, and the model only helps if its answer helps you to understand the real world. So now you know what an economic model is. In the next presentation, we will start to build the perfectly competitive market model. But we also have some general rules from this presentation. When anyone presents you with an argument in economics, make sure you see their model. Ask them for a full list of their assumptions and see if these assumptions make sense. If their assumptions are not sensible, then the output of their model will also not be sensible. Garbage in, garbage out. And also, ask them for the empirical validation. Has the model been checked against the real world? If not, then be very skeptical about the model. After all, an economic model is only useful if it helps us answer real-world economic questions.